The Denver Broncos have to trim their roster from 90 to 53-man players, and while George Paton and Sean Payton have the toughest job, we play GM, and we predict the final 53-man roster here on today's episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
One of the toughest days around the NFL is fast approaching as a handful of teams will have to trim their rosters from 90 to 53 players by Tuesday, 2 o'clock p.m. Mountain Time. Tough job to be had by all. We'll give our final 53-man roster prediction here in today's episode of the show. Broncos Country, welcome into another episode of Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network. You know it's your team every day. A special shout out to all the everydayers out there in Broncos Country. Thanks for tuning in and making us your first listen, however you choose to do so. And if you're not yet everydayer, become one. Hit that subscribe to that follow button so you never miss out on what's going on with your favorite team. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports, joined as always by Sayre Bedinger, site expert over there, predominantlyorange.com. And we're going to go through the Broncos offensive side of the ball, defensive side of the ball, special teams. We're predicting our final 53-man roster, but we're going to tell you, well, the Broncos might be keeping 6 players at wide receiver on their 53. On offense, we'll tell you why the Broncos defense is loaded on that side of the ball. And then we'll go through some of the prime practice squad candidates who could clear waivers when it's all said and done. You get all that here on today's show. Sayre, this is always hard, man. You know, I always want to approach the 53 roster cuts with just a little bit of grace because so many players, there's going to be a handful, not just for the Broncos, but for 31 other teams whose NFL careers will essentially be over. They may not get an opportunity ever again. You're going to see other guys get second chances here, but, you know, we got to play the tough job of being the general manager here and trying to build out the 53-man roster. Let's start on the offensive side of the ball. I've got 25 players on offense for Denver on the 53. How many do you have? Because I know this is still, it's hard when you factor in all the different circumstances here.
Yeah, it's a sticky situation. I've got 24 on my offense as of right now, and then obviously we'll figure out the rest as we go. 25 defense, 3 special teams. So I'm spoiler alert for everybody. I've got 52 on mine right now, but I might convince myself of a 53rd as we're going along here. I think, Cody, let's just go through the positions that right now feel like they're kind of set in stone, or if there really is. I don't know if there is one on offense. That's the thing with, I think defensively we could say, but offensively, now there might be even some confusion about whether or not you're keeping 3 quarterbacks because Sam Ehlinger played really well in the preseason, and the Broncos now have, I think, a situation on their hands at receiver that they've kind of created some confusion. So where do you even begin? Because I've got them keeping 2 quarterbacks. I still think, you know, Sam's going to make it to the practice squad. I feel like that's kind of been maybe the plan all along. And I don't even think he's subject to waivers as a veteran at this point. So the Broncos could easily just cut him, don't subject him to waivers, bring him back to the practice squad. Everybody's happy. He's dressing every game day. So I think that's what they'll do to save a roster spot. But like I said, I've got 52 guys. I can't even figure out a way to fill it. I think, like we said, we'll figure it out before the show's over.
I'm curious where we're like one off between you and I in comparison. I'm with you. I've got them keeping 2 QBs, Bo Nix, Jarrett Stidham. And because of what you mentioned there, Sam being a vested veteran, they can cut him, bring him right back onto the practice squad, not subjected to waivers. There you go. He's going to be there. We'll talk about practice squad guys here in a little bit. Running back, I'm still sticking with 4 backs on this roster, and I think it's very clear who those backs are. Though, once again, the Broncos could operate with some confusion here, and maybe they trade somebody else away. You know, we all think Audric Estime is probably going to get traded or released, but there's a chance. What if they try to trade Tyler Bidet away? I mean, they've featured him quite a bit. Maybe that could be in the cards. I hope not. I think Bidet should be on this roster. I've got them carrying 4 backs. I've got JK, I've got RJ, I've got Tyler Bidet, and I've got Jaleel McLaughlin as my 4 backs here on the 53. Where are you at here at this position?
I guess that's where you went wrong then, Cody, because everybody else rhymes. You should have gone with Estime. You had RJ, JK, Bidet, Estime. That's the way. No, I think that obviously that's where things seem to be trending right now, but I'm with you. I'm kind of like, I don't know if I'm in my head about this or if I'm just expecting the unexpected. I think that it would be the everybody's expecting Jaleel McLaughlin and Tyler Bede to be the other two backs at this point. So yeah, what if they do throw us a little curveball here? I think you could make a case for Audric Estime as somebody the team drafted in the 5th round last year. Sean Payton openly said that they had a 3rd round grade on him. He's the youngest guy on the team. He played really well in the preseason finale. I mean, you could go on and on here, but ultimately you can't help but wonder if that's more of a, organizational / player fit with those two, because it just feels like Audric has kind of been in the proverbial doghouse since late last season when he was a healthy scratch in favor of Tyler Bede for the playoff game. So I feel like you could make a really strong case for Estime to stick around, even though I get Jaleel McLaughlin has done more up to this point in the NFL, right? Averaging 4.8 yards per carry over his first 2 NFL seasons, although we did see a substantial decline last year. So maybe that's where I struggle here, is there's the bad taste in my mouth from last year, just an increased number of touches and snaps and decreased efficiency in every metric. I'd rather go with the younger guy who has more years on the contract, but I understand also that Jaleel is very well liked by this coaching staff, if not beloved by the coaching staff.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough position to try to break down, and we'll find out here on Tuesday, 2:00 p.m. Mountain Time, where the Broncos lean here, maybe even earlier here. And let's go to the wide receiver position. I've got them carrying 6. We already know Cortland, Marvin, Pat Bryant, Troy Franklin, Trent Sherfield. Those are the 5 most notable names there, but I've got them keeping undrafted receiver Joaquin Davis, just because you traded away Devon Vele, who was your 6'5" size guy. Joaquin is 6'4", has really elite intangibles that I feel like are going to be valuable. He'll be a game day inactive for you, but he's a guy that you can keep on your active roster while continuing to shape him, because he fits that size mold that Sean is looking for. Even though we didn't have necessarily the biggest numbers in the preseason, it's the whole body of work and stuff that we've seen in practice, I think, is going to be the deciding factor here. Do you agree with 6 wide receivers here?
I actually had them keeping 5, Cody. So this may be where we really differ in our overall roster projections. So I like the bold prediction of Joaquin Davis on your final 53. I think that's I want to talk about this later too, but I do think that the history and tradition of keeping an undrafted free agent is important to Sean Payton and the Broncos, obviously. But I think that's something that Sean does think about. I don't think it's something that he's going to try to shoehorn, but I think if he has an opportunity to do that, because you already have 7 guys or 6 guys inactive every week anyway. I mean, if you feel like there's somebody you can't sneak through waivers, like, make sure you keep that guy. So if Joaquin Davis is that guy, but otherwise I've got the other 5 guys on my roster. Tight end, I've got them keeping 4 now, which was a shift from the last time. The last time we did a projection. I've got them keeping, obviously, Evan Ingram, Adam Troutman, Nate Adkins, who Sean Payton kind of revealed that, he was basically on the roster. And then I've got them keeping Lucas Kroll. I mean, I think that he's played well enough down the stretch in this preseason. You're going to be without Nate Adkins for a couple of weeks. I think keeping Lucas Kroll in the fold, because he does also play some special teams for you, can give you some depth that you desperately need and give him another opportunity to prove maybe that upside that you believed he once had.
Yeah, you and I are very similar right there in terms of our line of thinking. That's the same exact thing that I have here at tight end. Let's go to the offensive line now at center. I've got Luke Wattenberg, Alex Forsyth. So there's 2 guys there. Feel like we're in agreement on that. Are we?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. At guard, maybe this is where it could be different. I've got them keeping 2 guys. I've got Ben Powers, Quinn Miners, but it's because of the caveat behind these guys at tackle, right? Garrett Bowles, Mike McGlinchey are 2 starters, but you have Matt Parrott, Alex Paucheski, guys who could play tackle and guard that could factor into being those backups behind, obviously, Ben and Quinn. And then I've got them keeping a 5th offensive tackle here in Frank Crum. So 9 total offensive linemen here for the Broncos on my 53.
I've got the exact same 9 guys, and I think it would have been 10 if Nick Gargiulo didn't get injured, Cody. I really do.
Yes.
I think he was looking really good out there. Was really excited for him. Hopefully he can make it back in a full recovery next offseason, because, I mean, you never know when the Broncos are going to need another starting guard there, and he may have those kind of chops. So I think that he's a good-looking young player, and really unfortunate to see him go down. But you and I are in agreement on the O-line. I mean, that's pretty shocking, because that's the biggest position group on the team. I think maybe Calvin Throckmorton is the discussion point there, but you can put him on your practice squad. You don't need to mess around with that. I don't know that there's any other young guys on this unit who stepped up enough over the course of the preseason to warrant a 53-man spot.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, and I think it's just so hard to evaluate O-line play in the preseason, especially when you get to those third string guys where, unless someone's really standing out, ideally you could sneak, a good portion of those guys onto your practice squad. So we'll see how things pan out. Broncos country, what did you think of our offensive side of the ball? Where did you agree with Sayre and I? Where did you differ? Make sure you let us know here on today's episode of the show. But coming up next, we're going to tell you why the Broncos defense is loaded on our final 53-man depth chart projection on that side of the ball. Here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
Today's episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by Rugiet. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them, but if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes, and effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right.
Well, if you have questions, you can always read real customer reviews on their website. If you are interested in checking it out, head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information.
Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or if you're ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment.
We have our NFL season previews coming up this week on the Locked On Network. And if you believe that the Broncos are going to be a dark horse AFC West winning candidate, well, guess what? FanDuel is a perfect place to get in on the action. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game.
Broncos country, we're going to give you our predictions for the 53-man roster on defense. But before we get into that, we have an important request. Locked On wants to hear from you. We've put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcasts like Locked On Broncos even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and answer questions about our advertising. So go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes a survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcasts.com/survey. You can also find the link in the show notes. Thanks so much for helping us out. Cody, I'm feeling like I'm about to add a 53rd player to my roster here, but let's start defensively on the defensive line, where, you know what, we had a great little competition there over the course of the preseason, kind of an underrated competition from the backup defensive line perspective. Savion Jones coming in means that one of the two guys, I think, between Jordan Jackson and Yoma Uwazurike, is going to be on the way out. What do you have for your defensive line, and do you even have 6 guys?
I have 6 guys on my defensive line. I was debating between 7 or 6. 7, in my opinion, would have meant that I kept Inyoma Uwazurike. I went with 6, and I'm not keeping him on this. I'm hoping they can get him back onto the practice squad. So I've got Zach Allen, John Franklin Myers, DJ Jones, Malcolm Roach, Savion Jones, and Jordan Jackson, whereas I think the Broncos with DJ and Malcolm, they're stout there in terms of those tackle positions. And I think that behind Zach Allen and behind JFM, I think you need 2 different guys who can back up and rotate, because the trenches are physical. They're violent. So I've got them keeping 6 here. It was hard. I was debating on any a lot, but I feel like I have a great chance to bring him back onto the practice squad potentially.
That's kind of how I'm feeling as well. I've got the same 6 guys on the defensive line, so you and I are kind of in agreement on that one. Jordan Miller also had a nice preseason for the Broncos and was able to get on the field there with the second unit, so maybe he's a sleeper if you're out there, kind of wondering, is there anybody that could steal a roster spot? Maybe Jordan Miller is that guy this year. For the edge position, I think you and I are going to be in agreement on that one. Cody, obviously, Nick Bonito, Jonathan Cooper, Jonah Ellis, Dondre Tillman, and Q Robinson. That's been pretty well set in stone since the NFL draft. Nobody has even really, I don't think anybody really even made like a strong case to take one of those spots from those guys, which you love to see the team load up on pass rushers before the preseason, but at the same time, you ain't mad about that group of 5 guys.
No, 5 guys is really the theme, I think, on at least on my 53-man roster projection defensively. I feel like Denver's got a really strong group of 5 guys at several positions, including here edge rusher. No disagreements there. And that leads us obviously here to inside linebacker. That's where we have 4 guys here. We'll get to the other 5 guys segments here in segment. But I've got Alex Singleton, I've got Dre Greenlaw, Justin Sternad, and Lavelle Bailey. I really debated here going with maybe adding a 5th guy and Jordan Turner being one of those guys as the 5th, or Karene Reed. And I feel like, okay, from a numbers perspective, I'd like to bring just one of those guys up, but it's going to impact another position group. So sticking with 4, and I'm going to try to bring those guys back on the practice squad. Where are you at inside linebacker? Are you different or are you the same?
This is where I'm adding my 53rd guy, Cody. Okay. So I had the flex spot here going into this. I'm going to keep Karene Reed in addition to the 4 guys that you picked. I think that he proved a lot over the course of the preseason. I constantly saw 47 in the mix for special teams, and he made a lot of plays defensively as well. I feel like he's one of those types of guys that you feel, because the Broncos invested a lot in him already. He was one of their highest priced undrafted free agents. They've already invested a lot in him. They've proven that they really like him. I feel like that's a guy that if you really like him a lot and you have a roster spot that's flexible, or you're not bringing in somebody from the outside, man, keep this guy around. He was flying around the field. So that's what I meant earlier when I said, hey, Sean Payton, he cares about this tradition of, keeping undrafted free agents. And you had Joaquin Davis on offense. I'm going to go ahead and keep Karene Reed here on defense. And this is the first 53-man roster prediction I've done that includes him. So, I'm excited about that. I feel like there's a chance that it could happen. Maybe we manifest it here on the podcast.
All right, we'll see. Obviously, Tuesday, 2:00 p.m. Mountain Time, you'll get a reaction show as the Broncos really formulate their 53. You'll get that a little bonus episode on Tuesday's Locked On Broncos. Now we're going to get to the 5 guys portion at cornerback. I've got them keeping 5: Pat Surtain, Riley Moss, Chris Abrams-Drain, Jaquan McMillan, and Jahdae Barron. The 2 guys are going to play in the nickel, can also have outside flex versatility. Really, I think the one guy that's probably just positioned to just stay outside would be Chris Abrams-Drain at this point. Though I know that the Broncos feel like he could also play inside from time to time. I feel like that's good flexibility at corner. And I also have 5 safeties as well. I've got Talanoa Hufanga, Brandon Jones, PJ Locke, J.L. Skinner, Devin Key. Like, that hasn't changed with that 5 guys theme that we had last week at corner and safety specifically.
Absolutely. We have the same 10 defensive backs. And I think obviously the big notable cut there would be Damari Mathis, who was a 4th round pick back in 2022. And you hope that you can trade somebody like that. Obviously everybody that, comments about Damari Mathis on our shows or we interact with on Twitter is like, you're not going to get anything for Damari Mathis. And I would just say, you just never know. You never know what teams are willing to give up for players around the league. It'll save the Broncos $3.4 million either way. So if they cut him or if they trade him, that's how much they save against the salary cap, which doesn't seem like a lot, but anything that they can continue to add or to roll over for what they're currently trying to do and keeping their own guys, Cody, I think is a big deal. Safety, another classmate of Damari Mathis, Delarian Turner-Yell. He would be getting cut in this instance. A free agent that the Broncos picked up, Sam Franklin Jr., he would be getting cut as well. So certainly some notable names in the defensive backfield that could be on the move. And you would love to see as many as the Broncos are going to have to cut, because that's the reality. You'd love to see them be able to strike at least a trade or 2, whether it's on defense with the depth that they have. And you and I talk about it all the time. They're very deep on defense, but also on offense where they have other guys that they may not just fit in the team's current plans.
So with all of these projections that we have made so far, we have 3 roster spots remaining. Who will it be? Well, easy. Your punter, your kicker, your long snapper, Will Lutz, Mitchell Fraboni. Though I will say, and I think Broncos Country feels the same way. I'm curious how you feel, Sayre. I feel very uneasy right now about Jeremy Crawshaw.
100%. I think after watching the preseason, and it's the preseason and you have a chance to, I guess, come back around in the regular season. But what's more translatable from the preseason to the regular season than what we're seeing from the kickers and the punters, right? I mean, it's that they have one job, and so I think with Crawshaw, maybe you do hedge your bets a little bit and bring somebody onto the practice squad after cuts are made around the league. I know Ryan Stonehouse is a name who continues to come up. A lot of Broncos fans want to see the team bring him in because he played his college ball, I believe, at Colorado State. Cody, you can correct me if I'm wrong there, but certainly would not be opposed to the Broncos bringing somebody like that in, because like you and I were talking about before we started the show, week 1 against the Titans, if your offense for some reason goes 3 and out, you can't be giving the Titans the ball at the 50-yard line and getting off to this crappy start. I'm so sick of this stuff, like these little things. Sean Payton talks about it, and we do need to be patient with rookies. But man, when you're talking about field position and hidden yardage, like those are things that matter so much to Sean Payton. You can't sacrifice it on the altar of, well, we got to get this guy reps. If he can't play, bring somebody in who can and stash him on the roster until he's actually ready.
I couldn't agree with you more. And here's the thing that's so crazy about the Crawshaw situation is, I mean, Sayre, in practice, all of us reporters, we watch him boom the heck out of it in the live periods, right? And, here and there, he has some consistency issues, but for the most part, about 90% of his punts that he's had in live sessions in practice have been really good. So there's some sort of disconnect where it's just not coming over in the games, but the Broncos can't just sit around and say, hey, we're going to wait to see that. Hopefully, in the regular season, you do that. I think I agree with you. I think after roster cuts happen, you bring on one punter to push him, because you cannot play around. Like Sean Payton's the type of guy who doesn't want to lose a game because of special teams. I can tell you that. So even though they drafted him, that patience meter might be wearing a little thin if he can't translate it, if he doesn't showcase something sooner rather than later. Broncos Country, make sure you let us know your thoughts on our 53-man roster on the defensive side of the ball, your concerns on Jeremy Crawshaw as punter as well here. But now, after roster cuts have happened, once you formulate your 53, now you have to field your 16-man practice squad. We'll highlight some of the prime candidates here that could end up on Denver's practice squad this season. We'll break that down and much more on today's episode of the show.
This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. The NFL season is right around the corner, and you can feel the buzz. Fantasy football season is here. Everyone's researching, drafting, and building their championship squads. And if you haven't joined a league yet, now's the time. It's all happening on Yahoo Fantasy. And this year, we're playing Yahoo Fantasy football, and you should too. Whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league, Yahoo Fantasy is loaded with fun ways to compete and brand new features that make the game even better.
With season kickoff on September 4th, now is the time to start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football, which offers so many fun ways to compete. Want more ways to play? Try the brand new Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine League mode, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated weekly until one team is left standing. Want to play instantly with friends? Try the new Draft with Friends mode. Prefer the classics? Get your crew together and go head-to-head in a private league. No crew, no problem. Join a public league. The easiest way to play. The NFL season kicks off September 4th, so don't wait. Start your leagues now. Draft now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. With roster cuts finalized in our projection here on today's episode of the show, we'll now formulate a practice squad, because these guys are going to be so important for continued player development, or if you need to elevate players for a few games while there's a player who's battling an injury. There's a lot of circumstances right now that we're looking at as we fill out our 16-man practice squad. Real quick, thank you to all the everydayers in Broncos Country for tuning in, making us your first listen. We appreciate you. Sayre, look, I always find trying to fill out your practice squad to be a little bit more of a challenging projection. You can talk about your key guys, but then as Sean Payton always reminds us, you're looking at 31 other players' rosters and cuts as well to try to fill things out here. But I think for the most part, you bring a large portion. Let's say you have 16 spots. I think 13 to 14 of those, you're really bringing back guys that have been on your roster since OTAs and minicamp. And then you have 2 or 3 spots that potentially go to someone who's away from your team, essentially. That's kind of how I have it playing out here. Let's talk about vested veterans. I think you and I talked about Sam Ehlinger early on. I think that'll be a pretty easy decision. Sam is one of those guys that would be vested. I also have fullback Michael Burton or Adam Prentice, or maybe both of those guys as vested veteran options that you can add to the mix, considering what we know about Nate Adkins. While Nate can play tight end, he's kind of that I play tight end, I play fullback. He's kind of that do-all Swiss Army knife here for Sean Payton, who really emphasized the importance of him. One or two of those guys could help fill in as practice squad to game day elevations. And then I got Calvin Throckmorton, obviously, at the guard position that you can bring up for 3 games if need be and not really hurt you in any way, shape, or form. Those are the 3 vested guys that I have. Is there anybody else that's vested that maybe you pinpointed there, or where are you starting things out here?
No, I think that it could be a situation where you see Michael Bandy back again, Cody. I mean, I don't know how much this coaching staff really loves him, but he's been around for quite some time. So, I mean, he's one of those vested guys that you feel like would be an option to come back always on the practice squad. But I'm with you. I kind of feel like it's more so of the young guys or out of house free agents. I think they very realistically could use, because I believe you get 4. I can't remember if it's 4 or 6 veterans now on the practice squad that you're allowed to
Good
have.
question.
Maybe one of the listeners can let us know, but it's a limited number. And obviously our theory about the punter, I think we may be onto something there. I think they might bring a punter onto the practice squad who is a vested veteran. So we'll end up seeing what happens with that. That's just a theory at this point. That's not concrete or inside information by any means. It's just an idea. But I think when you start talking about young guys, I think you got to start with Caleb Lohner. Like that guy, we cut him off our 53s just now, but I do think the Broncos would love to have him back if other teams that liked him in the pre-draft process don't end up stealing him away. I also think you're going to see a running back on the practice squad. And at this point, if Blake Watson is hurt and Audric Estime gets claimed or traded, I mean, Cody, the outside is where we're looking for running back help at this point. And in that case, I'd be very interested to find out where the Broncos would look.
Yeah, and in regards to Blake Watson specifically, this is also where I had some trouble, in the 53-man formulation. Also, the practice squad is he left the game on Saturday against the Saints with a knee injury, did not return, was able to walk off in his own power, but that doesn't really mean anything in the grand scheme of things. But let's say his injury is moderate to, in terms of timeline right there. I feel like he could be one of your injured reserve spots, right? Because now at roster cuts, you can designate 2 players for IR short term to return here at this juncture, because it used to be if you place anyone on IR during training camp or the preseason, they're done for the year. So that really kind of made the roster shuffle a little difficult at times. Drew Sanders is one of those guys that will go on probably that IR immediately once roster cuts happen. And then maybe Blake Watson's the other guy there, but that does open up a need for a running back here on your practice squad, which I don't know who that is. I really have Blake Watson as that guy at this point, Sayre. So we'll continue to monitor that situation. I've got them keeping 4 receivers on the practice squad. I've got Michael Bandy, as you mentioned. I've got Courtney Jackson, Jerwan Newton, and Kyrie Rowan, who I thought had a very impressive last preseason game, showcases the speed. I think when you're trying to go in your scout preparation on a week-to-week game day basis, if you play a team that has a really fast dude, it's hard to simulate that if you don't have really fast dudes on your practice squad. Rowan, I think that trait right there is something that's going to play into his favor here for the Broncos as they formulate things here. Where are you at in terms of linebacker? Because I agree with you. I have Caleb Lohner, but where are you at with linebacker here for the Broncos? Do you have any of them keeping any of the guys? I know you have Karene Reed making your 53 now. He's on my practice squad. I have Jordan Turner on mine.
I absolutely think Jordan Turner, yes. He showed plenty in the preseason to warrant a practice squad spot and continued development for this team. And you never know, the linebacker position could once again be one of those ones where the Broncos are looking for outside help and they try to bring some veteran in. So that's going to be an interesting thing to watch this team kind of juggle. How many veterans do they keep on the practice squad? How do they figure that out while guys are still injured or recovering from injuries and whatnot? So I'm glad you brought up Drew Sanders though too, Cody, speaking of the linebacker position, because yes, he wasn't on either of our 53s, but I don't think you and I are projecting that he's going to be cut. Although that wouldn't surprise me. I don't think it'll happen, but it wouldn't surprise me to see that come across the wire. I think it would be a little bit of a shock factor initially because you'd be officially saying goodbye to somebody, but the team did that just last year with Greg Dulcich. I know that, Sean wasn't part of drafting Greg, but, obviously George Payton was part of drafting him, and he's a fellow UCLA guy. So I think that was a tough cut for them to have to make, but I just don't think the timing is right for that to happen for Drew Sanders.
Yeah, and I also feel like from a medical standpoint, too, we know he had a procedure done on his foot. He's been in a boot. So he's training and rehabbing at the facility. So for me, that's where it kind of just makes the most sense for him to be an IR candidate, short-term to return, because when the injury happened, Sean told us, right, the timeline's north of 7 to 8 weeks. So that's all right. That's into the regular season, maybe week 6, week 7. I don't know. We'll see how things play out here. I have them keeping nose tackle Jordan Miller, tight end Caden Prescorn as well. So 2 tight ends when you factor in Loner, Prescorn, who can play that fullback role for you as well, though they were playing Adam Troutman at that position a little bit in certain situations, and then motioning him to the end of the line of scrimmage. So we'll see where things are at there. And then I have them keeping one cornerback, but I kind of put it as either this guy or that guy. I have them keeping either Jaden Robinson or Quentin Newsome as one of those practice squad corners.
Yeah, I like Jaden Robinson, what we saw from him in the preseason, Cody. I brought him up a few times, thought he made another little flash play against the New Orleans Saints as well. Nothing too crazy, but he continued to show up at least once a game. So I think that's somebody that you say, hey, this guy showed up when the games were being played. He's got a little something there, something to develop. Of course, when you believe in a guy like Jim Leonard enough to give him the promotions that the Broncos have, you want to get him as many young minds to mold as you possibly can. And so I like the idea of stacking a couple of DBs on the practice squad, but going to be fascinating to see how the Broncos do assemble it, because we do see this team. I don't know if it's more than others, Cody, but they do shuffle guys up all throughout the season, and they do use them on game days all throughout the season. So whoever they do keep on the practice squad, I think we can expect at some point to see the majority of these guys.
Yeah, and then I left 2 spots open to 31 other teams' potential cuts. 2 spots there. I agree with you on maybe one of those spots going to a punter. I don't know what other position right now I would necessarily add to. Maybe safety. Maybe you add another defensive back into the mix here. I don't feel like at this point you need to add another pass rusher, though that's something that could change down the line, which means that probably Andrew Farmer would probably end up elsewhere after the preseason officially ends and roster cuts happen. So there you have it, Broncos country. We've gone through our 53-man roster. We've gone through our offensive projections, defensive, special teams, and practice squad. It's very, very important. Make sure you send us your 53-man projections. You can comment it on YouTube, or you can send it on social media, on Twitter at Cody Roark NFL, at Sayre Bedinger, at Locked On Broncos. But that'll wrap up today's episode of the show. Broncos country, appreciate you as always for making us your first listen. For your second listen, go check our friends over there, Locked On Fantasy Football. And for tomorrow's episode of the show, the 53-man roster deadline will be here. Sarah and I, we're going to be on standby as we wait for the moves to happen. So when the roster cuts happen, they're official, you'll get a brand new episode of the show. Broncos country, we'll see you then.